The crimson suns of Kepler 442 cast their dying light across the ruins of New Geneva, as Dr. Marcus Webb crawled through the rubble of what had once been humanity's greatest colony. His research uniform was torn and bloodied. His breathing labored, from 3 days of hiding in the underground laboratories while the Vex death squads hunted survivors above. The attack had come without warning. Humanity had been expanding peacefully across the outer rim for 2 centuries, building colonies and research stations on dozens of worlds. They were explorers and scientists, farmers and artists. They had no armies, no weapons of war, no concept that such monsters could exist in the civilized galaxy. Marcus pressed himself against a collapsed wall as the sound of metal boots echoed through the destroyed streets. Through a crack in the debris, he watched a Vex patrol march past. The creatures stood 9 feet tall, their reptilian bodies covered in black armor that pulsed with stolen energy. Their faces were nightmares made flesh. Multiple eyes that glowed like dying stars, mouths filled with rows of crystalline teeth that could tear through steel. Most horrifying were the neural parasites writhing beneath their translucent skin, feeding on the life force they had drained from countless victims. War Chief Kravoc stood atop the burning remains of the colony's central spire, his forearms spread wide in triumph. Around his neck hung a collection of human skulls, each one representing a world that had fallen to his forces. The Vex Empire had swept across human space like a plague, turning thriving colonies into feeding grounds for their parasitic hunger. Another soft species broken, Kravoc growled to his subordinates, his voice like grinding stone. These humans scream so beautifully when we extract their essence. Their terror gives the parasites such strength. The Vex had perfected the art of conquest through suffering. They didn't simply kill their enemies. They drained them slowly, feeding on fear and pain to power their biological war machines. Humanity's peaceful nature had made them perfect victims. Without weapons or military knowledge, human colonies had fallen one after another like dominoes. Marcus clutched the emergency beacon in his trembling hands. It was humanity's last hope, a desperate message that would be broadcast across the galaxy to anyone who might listen. His fingers traced the activation switch as explosions echoed in the distance. The Vex were systematically destroying everything humans had built, ensuring that nothing remained but ash and memory. The transmission began with the screams of the dying. Marcus had recorded everything. The initial attack, the herding of civilians into extraction chambers, the horrific process by which the Vex drained human life force to fuel their conquest. His voice was broken when he finally spoke. To anyone receiving this signal, humanity is dying. We are Dr. Marcus Webb of the Kepler Research Collective, broadcasting from the ruins of New Geneva. The Vex Empire has destroyed 47 human colonies in the past 6 months. We had no armies to fight them, no weapons to resist them. We were explorers, not warriors. On the bridge of the deep space vessel, Wanderer Captain Nora Hayes felt. Her blood turned to ice as the transmission reached her ship. She was one of the few humans who had escaped the initial wave of attacks, her exploration vessel having been conducting a survey mission in the Void sector when her species' worlds began to burn. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres called from the communication station, his voice tight with emotion. "There are more transmissions coming in, emergency beacons from colony worlds across human space." The main screen filled with images of devastation. Epsilon Prime, where children had built the galaxy's most beautiful botanical gardens, now a charred wasteland. Harmony Station, humanity's first successful deep space habitat, torn apart and left spinning like a broken toy. World after world, dream after dream, reduced to cosmic debris. Nora's crew was the last free human ship they knew of. 43 souls aboard a single vessel, the survivors of a species that had once numbered in the billions. They had spent months running, hiding, trying to find some way to strike back at the monsters who had destroyed their civilization. "How many worlds are left?" asked Chief Engineer Rodriguez, though he already knew the answer would break his heart. "According to the last intelligence reports," Nora replied, her voice hollow. "Earth itself is under siege. The Vex fleet reached the Sol system 3 days ago. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Earth, Humanity's birth world, the cradle of their species, was dying while they drifted helplessly in the void. They were refugees now, the scattered remnants of a people who had dared to reach for the stars. Marcus's transmission continued from New Geneva, his words growing weaker as the Vex closed in on his position. We were peaceful. We harmed no one. We built beautiful things and asked only to explore the wonders of creation. Now our children cry out in the extraction chambers while monsters feast on their souls. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the broadcast. Marcus was running now, his breathing ragged as he fled through the ruins of human dreams. If anyone receives this message, remember us. Remember that we tried to be good. Remember that we reached for the stars with hope in our hearts. Don't let our deaths be meaningless. The transmission cut to static as the Vex found him. Captain Nora Hayes stared at the empty screen, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. For months they had run like frightened animals. They had hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems, always moving, always afraid. But humanity had not always been prey. She activated the ship's historical archives, scrolling through files that few humans had accessed in generations. Before the age of exploration, before the colonies and research stations, humanity had been something else entirely. They had been warriors. They had fought wars that spanned continents and developed weapons that could crack worlds. They had been so efficient at destruction that they had nearly destroyed themselves. That was why they had chosen peace. That was why they had turned their backs on war and embraced exploration instead. They had buried their violent past and tried to become something better. But monsters like the Vex didn't understand mercy. They saw kindness as weakness, peace as invitation to conquest. They had mistaken humanity's choice for pacifism as inability to fight back. They were about to learn the difference. Rodriguez? Nora called to her chief engineer. How long would it take to modify our mining charges into warheads? The engineer looked up in surprise. Captain, those are industrial explosives. They're not designed for combat. Neither were we, Nora replied, her voice carrying a new edge that her crew had never heard before. Until today. The emergency session of the Human High Council convened in the deepest bunkers beneath Earth's surface as Vex bombardment rained down from orbit. Director James Blackstone stood before the holographic displays showing humanity's final strongholds burning across the galaxy. His weathered face bore the weight of watching his entire species face extinction in real time. 73 colonies confirmed destroyed, reported Intelligence Chief Dana Pierce, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Estimated casualties exceed 4 billion souls. The Vex are systematically harvesting human life force to power their expansion into the galactic core. The council chamber shook as another energy barrage struck the planetary shields above. Each blast weakened Earth's defenses further, bringing the inevitable closer with each passing hour. The homeworld that had birthed humanity's dreams of peaceful exploration would soon join the growing list of dead worlds. Commander Jake Steele burst through the chamber doors, his reconnaissance armor still smoking from his emergency return through Vex-controlled space. His team had been conducting deep intelligence gathering on enemy capabilities, and what they had discovered changed everything. Director? Jake gasped, his face pale with exhaustion and horror. The Vex aren't just conquering us. They're using human neural patterns as templates for something massive. They're building a consciousness harvester the size of a moon in the Kepler Nebula. Dr. Luna Park, the Council's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward with trembling hands holding a data tablet. Her research had uncovered humanity's one advantage in this cosmic nightmare, though the price of that knowledge had nearly broken her mind. I've analyzed the captured Vex neural parasites, she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. The creatures that allow them to drain life force from other species. They have a fatal flaw when they encounter human brain patterns. The council leaned forward as Luna activated her holographic displays. The images showed microscopic parasites writhing in apparent agony when exposed to human neural energy. Our consciousness operates on frequencies that are toxic to their parasites, Luna continued. When they try to feed on us directly, the parasites begin to die. That's why the Vex use extraction chambers instead of direct contact. They have to filter our life force through machines to make it safe for consumption. Director Blackstone felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in months of constant defeat. "What are you saying, Doctor?" "I'm saying that humans are naturally immune to Vex mind control. More than that, we're poisonous to their biological systems. If we could find a way to weaponize our neural patterns, we could turn our greatest weakness into their destruction." The chamber fell silent except for the distant rumble of bombardment. For the first time since the war began, humanity had found something resembling hope in the darkness. Commander Steele activated his tactical display, showing the intelligence his team had gathered at terrible cost. 3 of his best soldiers had died getting this information, their sacrifice now meaning everything to their species' survival. "The Vex have a rigid command structure," Jake explained. "War Chief Kravox controls the entire invasion fleet through a neural network of parasites. If we could disrupt that network using our natural immunity, their coordination would collapse. Completely." Director Blackstone studied the data with growing excitement. The Vex had made a critical error in their conquest of humanity. They had assumed humans were just another weak species to be harvested and consumed. They hadn't realized they were trying to feed on the one form of consciousness that could destroy them. "How many ships do we have left?" Blackstone asked his military advisors. General Patricia Fox consulted her tactical reports, her expression grim. 17 vessels scattered across the galaxy. Most are civilian transports or research ships like Captain Hayes's vessel. We have perhaps 2,000 souls left alive in all of human space. 2,000 against an empire of trillions, muttered Council Member Roberts. Even with this neural advantage, how can we possibly fight back? Dr. Luna Park stepped forward again, her eyes burning with scientific fervor and desperate hope. "There's something else. The historical archives contain references to Project Phantom, a defensive protocol established after the colonial wars. It was designed to activate if humanity ever faced extinction." Director Blackstone's eyes widened. Project Phantom was a myth, a legend whispered about in military circles but never confirmed. The story claimed that humanity's greatest military minds had prepared for the possibility that their species' peaceful nature might one day be exploited by hostile forces. "Access the Phantom archives," Blackstone ordered, his voice carrying new authority. "If it exists, now is the time." The quantum computers deep beneath Earth's surface hummed to life, accessing files that had been sealed for over 2 centuries. What they revealed made the entire council gasp in amazement. Hidden across the galaxy in dead systems and forgotten asteroid belts, humanity had built a secret fleet. Ships designed not for exploration or trade, but for one purpose: the complete annihilation of any force that threatened human survival. The vessels had been waiting in hibernation mode for 200 years, powered by automated systems and guarded by artificial intelligences, programmed with humanity's darkest knowledge of warfare. 67 ships, General Fox read from the newly unlocked files. Each one equipped with weapons that were banned after the colonial wars. Neural disruptors, quantum torpedoes, reality warping drives that can fold space itself into weapons. Commander Steele studied the ship specifications with growing awe. "These aren't exploration vessels. They're instruments of extinction. Our ancestors built them to ensure that if humanity ever faced annihilation, we would take our enemies with us." The activation codes scrolled across the screens, each one representing a ship that could level worlds or crack moons. The Phantom Fleet had been humanity's ultimate insurance policy, created by a species that had learned the hard way that sometimes peace could only be preserved through the threat of absolute destruction. Director Blackstone reached for the activation console, his hand trembling as he prepared to awaken weapons that hadn't been used since humanity's darkest age. The irony wasn't lost on him. To save their peaceful civilization, they would have to become the very monsters they had spent centuries trying not to be. "The Vex wanted to harvest human souls," he said quietly, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "They're about to discover that some souls are too dangerous to consume." The activation signal burst out from Earth at faster than light speeds, racing toward hidden coordinates across the galaxy. In dead systems where no life had stirred for millennia, ancient machines began to wake. Weapon systems that could unmake reality itself started their startup sequences. The Phantom Fleet was rising from its long sleep, carrying with it all of humanity's accumulated knowledge of how to wage war against impossible odds. War Chief Kravox would soon learn why humanity had chosen peace, because they were so terrifyingly good at war. In the frozen depths of the void sector, where no star had shone for 1 billion years, something ancient stirred to life. The activation signal from Earth reached the hidden shipyard designated Phantom Base Alpha, and automated systems that had waited 2 centuries in perfect silence began their awakening protocols. Admiral Victoria Stone had been dead for over 100 years, but her consciousness lived on in the quantum matrix of the flagship HMS Retribution. The artificial intelligence that bore her memories and tactical genius opened digital eyes for the first time since the end of the colonial wars, immediately accessing the situation reports flooding in from across human space. Analysis complete. Victoria's synthesized voice echoed through the empty command bridge as holographic displays showed the scale of the Vex invasion. Humanity faces extinction-level threat. Phantom Protocol authorization confirmed, initiating full fleet activation. Across 17 dead systems, 67 ships began to wake from their long sleep. These were not the peaceful exploration vessels that had carried humanity to the stars. They were instruments of absolute destruction, built by a species that had nearly destroyed itself and learned to weaponize that knowledge. Each ship was a masterpiece of controlled violence, designed to fight enemies that conventional weapons couldn't touch. The HMS Nemesis materialized first, its reality-warping drive folding space around its midnight black hull. Captain Rex Hamilton's consciousness awakened within the ship's neural core, his memories intact from the day he had volunteered to become one with his vessel. He had been humanity's greatest tactical mind during the colonial wars, and death had not diminished his brilliance. "Fleet status report," Rex commanded, his voice carrying across quantum communication channels to his fellow ghost captains. HMS Apocalypse Online, reported Captain Diana Cross. Her consciousness merged with a ship capable of cracking planets. Quantum torpedo bays loaded and ready. HMS Vengeance reporting, called Captain Thomas Viper from his vessel that could phase through solid matter. Neural disruptor arrays charging to full power. One by one, the Phantom Fleet came alive. Ships that existed partially outside normal space-time. Vessels that could turn gravity itself into a weapon. Craft equipped with engines that burned the fabric of reality as fuel. They were humanity's darkest creations, built during an age when survival had required embracing the monster within. War Chief Kravox stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Harvester, watching with satisfaction as his forces completed the extraction of Earth's remaining population. Billions of human souls had already been processed, their life force feeding the great consciousness harvester in the Kepler Nebula. Soon, the weapon would be complete, and the Vex Empire would be able to drain entire star systems of life with a single pulse. "War Chief," his science officer reported, "our neural parasites are reporting strange readings from the outer rim. The monitoring stations have gone silent in 17 systems." Kravox's 4 eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Investigate immediately. If any humans survived our harvest, I want them found and processed." The Vex Scout fleet that arrived at Phantom Base Alpha found something impossible. Space itself seemed to twist and writhe around ships that shouldn't exist, vessels that appeared solid one moment and ghostly the next. The lead scout ship tried to scan the strange craft and immediately lost all its instruments to feedback that burned through its neural networks. Admiral Victoria Stone watched the Vex Scouts with the patience of the dead. Her consciousness had spent 2 centuries analyzing every possible threat humanity might face, running millions of combat simulations in the space between seconds. She knew exactly how this battle would unfold. "Begin the demonstration," she commanded. The HMS Retribution fired a single shot from its quantum cannon. The beam didn't travel through space so much as rewrite the laws of physics around it, turning the vacuum between ships into a conductor for pure destruction. The Vex Scout ship didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. Its atoms scattered across 17 dimensions simultaneously. The surviving Vex vessels tried to flee, but Captain Rex Hamilton's HMS Nemesis folded space around them like origami, trapping them in a gravity well that compressed matter into something denser than neutron stars. Their death screams were transmitted back to the Vex fleet in frequencies that made their neural parasites writhe in agony. War Chief Cravox received the transmission and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. His species had conquered. Thousands of worlds faced every form of resistance the galaxy could produce. Nothing had ever stood against them effectively. But these ships fought with weapons that violated the basic laws of reality. "What manner of creatures build such abominations?" he growled, studying the tactical data from the destroyed scouts. His chief scientist, a bloated parasite host named Vex Prime Zulon, analyzed the quantum signatures with growing horror. "War Chief, these vessels use technology that predates our empire by eons. The energy signatures suggest they can manipulate matter at the subatomic level, fold space-time like fabric, even alter the fundamental constants of physics within localized areas." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the few surviving human colonies began to receive impossible transmissions. Captain Nora Hayes, still hiding in the Wanderer with her skeleton crew, nearly fell from her command chair when her communications array detected a signal on emergency frequencies that had been silent for 2 centuries. "This is Admiral Victoria Stone of the Human Phantom Fleet." The transmission began, the voice carrying authority that made even death seem like a minor inconvenience. "All surviving human vessels, prepare to receive tactical coordination data. The age of running is over. The age of reckoning has begun." Nora's crew stared at their screens in amazement as fleet deployment data filled their computers. 67 ghost ships were moving through hyperspace toward strategic positions across Vex-controlled territory. Each vessel carried enough firepower to level civilizations, commanded by the preserved consciousness of humanity's greatest military minds. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres whispered, "according to these files, each Phantom ship is crewed by the uploaded consciousness of volunteers from the colonial wars. They've been waiting in digital death for over 2 centuries for a threat like this." Chief Engineer Rodriguez studied the technical specifications with growing awe. "These ships don't just use advanced weapons. They are weapons. The hulls are grown from quantum crystallized matter. The engines burn dark energy itself, and the navigation systems can chart courses through dimensions that don't technically exist." On the primitive world of Kepler-7, where the last free human colony struggled to survive in hidden underground bunkers, elder statesman Professor William Drake felt hope kindle in his chest for the first time in months. He had been a young soldier during the colonial wars, one of the few survivors who remembered the terrible beauty of humanity unleashed in total war. "The Phantom Fleet," he whispered to the frightened colonists around him. "They told us it was just a legend, a cautionary tale about the weapons we built during our darkest days. But it was real. They were waiting for the day when our peaceful nature would be mistaken for weakness." High above Kepler-7's atmosphere, reality rippled like disturbed water as the HMS Doomsday emerged from dimensional transit. The ship was massive, its hull extending across multiple layers of space-time simultaneously. Its captain, Colonel Maya Phoenix, had been humanity's expert in xenocide warfare during the colonial wars. Her uploaded consciousness now commanded weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. "Kepler-7 colony, this is Colonel Phoenix." Her voice reached the underground bunkers through quantum transmission. "Your long nightmare is ending. The Vex wanted to harvest human souls. They're about to discover that some souls are forged from fire and fury, and they burn everything they touch." The Phantom Fleet moved through the galaxy like avenging angels, each ship a monument to humanity's capacity for beautiful, terrible destruction. They had slept for 2 centuries, waiting for the day when their peaceful descendants would need the monsters their ancestors had chosen to become. The battle for humanity's soul began at the edge of the Kepler Nebula, where the Vex consciousness harvester hung like a cancerous moon against the cosmic backdrop. War Chief Cravox had assembled his entire armada to protect the weapon that would complete his species' dominion over the galaxy. 3,000 Vex warships formed defensive patterns around the massive structure, their hulls pulsing with the stolen life force of countless civilizations. Admiral Victoria Stone materialized the HMS Retribution at the nebula's edge, her quantum sensors analyzing the enemy formation with the cold precision of digital death. Around her, the Phantom fleet emerged from hyperspace like specters materializing from nightmare, their reality-warping drives creating ripples in space-time that made nearby stars flicker. "Fleet status report," Victoria commanded, her consciousness interfacing directly with every ship in the Armada. "All vessels operational," reported Captain Rex Hamilton from the HMS Nemesis. "Neural disruptor arrays synchronized. Reality anchors deployed. We are ready to remind the galaxy why humanity chose peace." The Vex fleet detected the Phantom ships and immediately opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams that could melt continents lanced through space, followed by swarms of parasitic missiles designed to burrow into enemy hulls and consume their crews from within. The display was magnificent and terrible, enough firepower to sterilize solar systems concentrated on 67 targets. The weapons passed harmlessly through the Phantom fleet like light through ghosts. "Phase shields at maximum efficiency," reported Captain Diana Cross from the HMS Apocalypse. "Enemy weapons cannot affect matter existing in parallel dimensions." Beginning counterattack sequence. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a demonstration of what happened when a species that had nearly destroyed itself decided to unleash that knowledge on an external enemy. The Phantom fleet fought with weapons that turned science fiction into science fact, each shot rewriting the fundamental laws of physics within localized space. The HMS Vengeance fired its gravity cannon, creating a miniature black hole that consumed an entire Vex battle group in seconds. The event horizon twisted and writhed as it devoured ships, crews, and the very concept of existence within its influence. When it collapsed, nothing remained but a sphere of absolute darkness that hurt to perceive. Captain Thomas Viper's HMS Shadowstrike phased directly through a Vex carrier, its hull existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As it passed through the enemy vessel, it left behind quantum mines that exploded across 17 different planes of reality. The carrier didn't just die, it was erased from every possible timeline where it had ever existed. War Chief Kravox watched his armada being systematically annihilated and felt his parasites writhing in terror within his body. These humans fought like beings touched by cosmic insanity, wielding forces that no sane species would dare harness. His weapons couldn't touch them. His tactics meant nothing against enemies who could rewrite cause and effect at will. "All ships, concentrate fire on the consciousness harvester," he roared, desperate to complete his weapon before these ghost ships could stop him. "If we can activate the device, we can drain every living thing in the galaxy and use that power to destroy them." The massive harvester began to charge, its crystalline arrays focusing the stolen life force of billions into a single reality-breaking pulse. Energy readings climbed beyond measurement as the weapon prepared to murder entire star systems with a single activation. Admiral Victoria Stone observed the charging weapon with the patience of eternity. She had run this scenario through 10 million combat simulations, analyzing every possible variable. The Vex had made a critical error in their desperation. They had chosen to use their ultimate weapon while the Phantom fleet was present to observe it. "Colonel Phoenix," Victoria transmitted to the HMS Doomsday, "deploy the Omega Protocol." Colonel Maya Phoenix's consciousness smiled with digital satisfaction as she accessed humanity's most forbidden military secret. During the colonial wars, human scientists had developed a weapon so terrible that its very existence had helped end the conflict. Both sides had been too horrified to continue fighting after witnessing its demonstration. The HMS Doomsday opened a portal in space-time, itself not to another location but to another universe entirely. From that breach emerged something that should not exist, a cascade of anti-reality that consumed existence itself, turning matter and energy back into the primordial void from which all things had emerged. The anti-reality wave struck the consciousness harvester just as it prepared to fire. The collision between ultimate creation and absolute destruction created a paradox that made nearby space scream in frequencies that drove nearby Vex crews insane. The harvester, containing the stolen essence of countless civilizations, met its perfect opposite and simply ceased to have ever existed. The explosion that followed was visible from neighboring galaxies. When the light faded, the center of the Vex armada was gone. Not destroyed, not scattered, gone. As if the universe had decided that particular region of space had been a mistake. The surviving Vex ships found themselves floating in a sphere of absolute nothingness, their instruments unable to process what they were detecting. War Chief Kravok stared at the impossible void where his ultimate weapon had been and felt something break in his mind. His species had conquered countless worlds, faced every form of resistance the galaxy could produce. But these humans wielded forces that went beyond technology, beyond science, beyond the very concept of warfare itself. "Retreat," he whispered, his voice carrying across all Vex communication channels. "Full retreat. These beings are not natural. They are demons wearing the faces of mortals." But the Phantom Fleet was not finished with their demonstration. As the Vex tried to flee, Captain Rex Hamilton's HMS Nemesis began folding space around the entire enemy armada, creating a gravity trap that pulled fleeing ships back into the battle zone like insects caught in amber. "No one leaves," Rex transmitted on all frequencies, his voice carrying the authority of digital death. "Your empire fed on the suffering of innocents. Today you learn what it means to be prey." The surviving Vex ships found themselves trapped in increasingly impossible situations. Some were caught in temporal loops, forced to experience their destruction over and over again. Others were shifted into dimensions where the laws of physics worked differently, watching their hulls dissolve as reality rejected their existence. The most fortunate were simply annihilated by conventional quantum weapons, their deaths mercifully quick. Throughout the galaxy, the few surviving human colonies detected the quantum aftershocks of the battle. On Kepler 7, Professor William Drake felt tears of joy streaming down his weathered face as his instruments registered the impossible energy signatures. "They did it," he whispered to the colonists gathered around him. "The legends were real. Humanity's greatest heroes returned from the dead to save us all." Captain Nora Hayes watched from the bridge of the Wanderer as space itself seemed to celebrate humanity's victory. The Vex Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, was collapsing as news of their defeat spread across their territories. Slave worlds were rising in rebellion, their populations inspired by the knowledge that the monsters could be beaten. The final Vex transmission came from War Chief Kravox himself, broadcast on all frequencies as his flagship burned around him. His voice was broken, filled with a terror that his species had never known before. "We were wrong," he gasped, his parasites dying within him as his ship's life support failed. "Humans are not prey. They are not victims. They are the nightmares that nightmares fear. We should never have wakened them." The transmission ended as the HMS Retribution's quantum cannon reduced the Vex flagship to its component atoms, scattering them across the void like cosmic dust. Admiral Victoria Stone surveyed the battlefield where humanity had transformed from victims into legends. The Phantom Fleet had fulfilled its purpose, proving that some species were too dangerous to be harvested, too resilient to be broken. The age of human victimhood was over. The age of human legend had begun. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler Nebula, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Word of humanity's impossible victory spread faster than hyperspace travel itself, carried by refugee ships and trading vessels to every corner of known space. The species that had been written off as extinct prey had revealed themselves as something far more dangerous, protectors with the power to unmake reality itself. Ambassador Claire Frost stood before the Great Assembly on Nexus Prime, addressing representatives from 300 civilizations. The massive chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates who had cowered before the Vex Empire now sought alliance with the legendary humans. Claire herself was a survivor of the colony massacres, one of the few thousand humans who had lived through the darkest days of their species' near extinction. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Claire began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "Through quantum translation systems, 6 months ago my people faced annihilation. We were peaceful explorers, scientists, and dreamers who had forgotten how to fight. The Vex Empire saw this as weakness and tried to harvest our souls to feed their expansion. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as holographic displays showed the aftermath of Vex-controlled worlds. Where once there had been slave camps and extraction facilities, now there were celebration parades and memorial gardens. Every world the Vex had conquered was free, their liberation made possible by humanity's ghost fleet. Today I stand before you not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a representative of the species that chose to stand between predators and their prey. The Phantom Fleet has disbanded, their mission complete, but their legacy lives on. Humanity offers a new compact to the civilized galaxy, the Galactic Protection Accord. The Zephyrian delegate, one of the crystal beings whose desperate plea had first alerted humanity to the Vex threat, rose from his seat with crystalline tears streaming down his translucent face. Ambassador Frost, your people saved us when no one else would. The great harmony of Zephyros pledges eternal friendship to humanity. But we must ask, what assurance do we have that your terrible weapons will never be turned against the innocent? Claire smiled with genuine warmth, understanding the fear behind the question. Representative Kai Zephyr, that is exactly why the Protection Accord includes oversight councils comprised of member species. Humanity learned long ago that absolute power corrupts absolutely. We nearly destroyed ourselves once with these weapons. We have no desire to repeat that mistake. Director James Blackstone watched the proceedings from Earth's rebuilt capital, where construction crews worked around the clock to repair the damage from the Vex bombardment. The planet's population was slowly recovering as human survivors emerged from hidden bunkers and refugees returned from their scattered exile. But Earth would never be the same. Memorial walls now bore the names of 4 billion souls lost to Vex harvesting. Status report on fleet reconstruction, Blackstone requested from his aide, Colonel Rebecca Storm, one of the few military officers who had survived the initial invasion. Sir, we've completed 23 new exploration vessels using conventional technology, Rebecca reported. The civilian population has voted overwhelmingly to maintain our peaceful exploration mandate. However, the Phantom Protocol remains active with full authorization codes. If another threat like the Vex emerges, the Ghost Fleet can be recalled from whatever digital afterlife they've returned to. The irony was not lost on either of them. Humanity had become the galaxy's protector precisely because they chose not to use their power except in the defense of others. The Phantom Fleet existed in quantum storage, their uploaded consciousness waiting patiently for the next existential threat to emerge. Captain Nora Hayes commanded the UES Hope's Dawn, humanity's newest exploration vessel, as it approached the former Vex homeworld of Draconis Prime. Her mission was not conquest, but something far more challenging, helping former enemy populations rebuild their civilization without the parasitic hierarchy that had defined them for millennia. Captain, reported her science officer, Dr. Michael Chen, we're detecting massive die-offs in the neural parasite populations. Without constant feeding on harvested life force, their biological systems are collapsing. Nora studied the readings with mixed emotions. The creatures that had nearly destroyed humanity were themselves victims of their own biology, evolved to require the suffering of others for survival. Any signs of sentient Vex who can survive without the parasites? Actually, yes, Dr. Chen replied with surprise. We're detecting several million individuals who appear to have successfully purged the parasites from their systems. They're requesting humanitarian aid and asylum. The request created a diplomatic crisis that reached the highest levels of human government. Could humanity protect the very beings who had tried to exterminate them? The debate raged for weeks, until a familiar voice settled the matter. Admiral Victoria Stone's consciousness materialized in the council chambers via quantum projection, her digital form flickering with traces of cosmic energy from her time merged with reality warping technology. The Phantom Fleet was created to protect innocence wherever it exists, Victoria announced to the assembled leaders. If these beings have freed themselves from the parasites that drove them to evil, then they deserve the same protection we would offer any species facing extinction. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would extend aid to their former enemies, establishing rehabilitation colonies where purged Vex could learn to live without feeding on the suffering of others. It was perhaps the greatest demonstration of the strength that came from choosing mercy over vengeance. Professor William Drake stood in the memorial garden on Kepler 7, where crystalline trees grown by Zephyrian refugees created a living monument to all who had died during the Vex invasion. Human and alien names were inscribed together in quantum crystal, their light visible from orbit as a beacon of remembrance and hope. "Grandfather," said young Lisa Drake, William's granddaughter who had been born during the darkest days of the war, "why did the bad aliens try to hurt everyone?" William knelt beside the 8-year-old, choosing his words carefully. "Because they were sick, child. They had creatures living inside them that made them need to hurt others to survive. But they're getting better now, with help from good people, who remember what it's like to be afraid. And the ghost ships? Will they come back if bad things happen again?" William looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, 67 ships crewed by digital heroes waited patiently for the next call to duty. "They'll always be there when good people need protecting, Lisa. That's what makes them legendary." Morgan listened, every word sinking into the marrow of his mind. "I studied your language," he said. "For years I tried to reconstruct its phonetics, but no AI, no linguistic grid could make sense of it." Ceridian gave a small nod. "Because it wasn't meant to be written, it was meant to be lived." Then after a pause, she added, "And because they erased it. Not just the words, the context, the emotion. They thought by deleting our recordings they deleted the code. But you still remember it," he said. "I remember the shape of it in my lungs." He swallowed hard. "Then why didn't you speak it at all? Why only in the auction hall?" Ceridian's eyes darkened slightly, not with anger but memory. "In the holding facility I was taught common," she said. "Not by teachers, by commands. The last daughter of the solar warnings, orders barked over loudspeakers. Obey, comply, eat, kneel." She looked down at her hands. They were folded in her lap, still composed. "I never spoke it. Not once. Not even when they shocked me. Because if I spoke it, it meant I accepted their rules, that their language had power over mine." Morgan's voice was barely audible. "But with me, you did." She didn't respond immediately. Then she looked over at him, eyes gold-flecked and steady. "Because you didn't ask me to. You gave me space, silence, and when you said your name, I remembered how to say mine." They sat that way for a long time. The console hummed quietly. Finally, Morgan asked, "Do you want to know who I was?" Sarah tilted her head slightly. "You still are someone. I see it in how your hands move. Slow, careful. You're used to preserving delicate things." He smiled, just a flicker. "I was a xenocultural historian, Ellerin academic sphere. I published a paper defending the solar people's historic legitimacy. They called it falsified, said I invented your glyph structure to discredit the Union. They exiled you," she said. More observation than question. "They erased my credentials, froze my grants. My students were reassigned. One of them even testified against me." His voice wasn't bitter, just hollow. "I spent the last 9 years drifting between forgotten systems, chasing artifacts no one wanted, decoding symbols no one believed were real. Until me. Until you." Another silence. This one wasn't empty. It was full of something fragile and terrifying. Recognition. Sarah shifted slightly in her seat, turning to face him. Her posture was upright, almost regal again, like muscle memory returning. "I've been touched 1,000 times," she said, her voice low. "Grabbed, bound, inspected, always without permission, always with purpose." Morgan didn't move. But no one ever just offered. She reached out, slow and deliberate, and placed her hand over his. Not trembling, not testing, just being. His fingers curled lightly under hers. He said nothing because nothing was needed. Her touch wasn't about comfort. It was about presence. And for the first time, Ceridian wasn't reclaiming her past. She was claiming her present. When Morgan finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "Thank you for trusting me." Her fingers tightened gently. "I don't. Not fully. she said, then softer. But I want to. The light dimmed another notch, the ship entering night mode. Outside, space turned quietly. Inside, a woman who had been silenced began to speak. And a man who had spent his life listening finally heard something worth holding on to. Not data, not language. A voice alive and choosing to stay. The alarm started as a soft pulse, barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems, then escalated into a crisp, urgent chime that echoed through the corridor like a heartbeat spiking. Morgan was already on his feet before the alert fully engaged. He moved fast, every step controlled, the motion of someone who'd lived too long expecting the worst behind every unexpected signal. Ceridian was close behind him. She didn't ask what was happening. She already knew. He reached the bridge console and scanned the readouts. Scavenger ping, he said. Small patrol ship, no transponder, approaching Vector 10. They're not broadcasting either. Pirates or slavers. Ceridian stood silent at his shoulder, eyes narrowed. They followed us? Unlikely. We've been running dark since Zyra, but it's a known trade route. We're not the only thing worth stripping out here. Unless they scan for solar biosignatures. Morgan hesitated. That shouldn't be possible. I've scrambled our heat trace, your vitals are masked. They found us before, she said, voice flat. The screen lit up with proximity data. The ship, sleek, narrow, meant for pursuit, was closing the gap fast. Too fast to outrun with the sublight engines. Morgan made a decision. We're not fighting, he said. Not with what we have. Strap in. He slammed the console, redirecting auxiliary power to shields and jamming, while Ceridian dropped into the co-pilot chair beside him. What are you doing? She asked. Dropping into the lower atmosphere of Saran 9. Thin air, toxic without filtration, but enough drag to make them think twice about following. Will it work? No, he said, flicking a switch. But it'll buy us 5 minutes. The ship groaned as it descended, systems straining against the sudden pull of gravity and pressure. The view outside turned amber, then darkened. Dust storms and static clouds swallowing the stars. The pirate ship held distance for a moment, unsure, and it opened fire. The first hit was glancing, clipped the port stabilizer. The next one would be fatal. Morgan's hands moved fast, but his breath came shallow. They weren't going to make it out clean. Not this time. Ceridian leaned forward. Give me control of the comm array, she said. What? Would I have one last language left? He didn't understand, but he did it. She activated the array, closed her eyes, and spoke. The sound wasn't solar. It wasn't common. It was guttural, pulsing, rhythmic, like bone drums wrapped in electricity. Morgan felt the sound before. He understood it. Something ancient. A field frequency coded into her voice. A sonic command laced with historical resonance, designed not to destroy but to warn. The pirate ship veered off. Not because of the sound itself, but because something in it triggered recognition. The transmission ended. Ceridian sagged in her chair. Morgan caught her arm instinctively. What did you just do? I spoke in a voice of their ancestral fear, she said. The solar once encoded cultural kill switches into auditory fields. Warnings, taboos, religious boundaries. Old empires. Remember them in their bones even if they don't know why. He stared at her. You weaponized memory. I survived it. I may as well use it. Morgan exhaled, slow and shaky. They floated now, hidden under a static layer of Sarvin's atmosphere. Safe, for the moment. She was pale, exhausted, but upright, grounded. He turned to her. You didn't have to do that. I did. You could have died. And if I did? She asked, her tone neutral. Morgan looked at her, searching her face. Then everything I fought for, everything I believed in would have died with you. Something flickered across her expression. A tightening of her jaw, a soft inhale. I don't want to be someone's symbol, Morgan. You're not. Then what am I to you? He didn't look away. "You're the first person who ever made me stop chasing the past," he said, "and start wanting a future." Silence expanded between them, thick, electric. Ceridian didn't speak. Instead, she stood, stepped closer, and looked him dead in the eye. Her breath was steady, her voice quiet. "I haven't been touched without pain in decades." Morgan didn't reach for her. He just stood there, arms at his sides, letting her choose. She reached for him. Not a desperate clutch, not a test. A decision. Her fingers slid along his jaw, her hand resting against his face, her thumb brushing the edge of his cheekbone. He closed his eyes. The kiss came slowly, gentle, weighted, a meeting of scar and solace. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. When they pulled apart, her eyes were clearer, her breath deeper. "I'm not healed," she said. "I'm not whole," he answered. "Then maybe," she said, "we could be something together." And outside, the storm raged on. But inside, for the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were beginning. The silence that followed their escape from the Union patrol was heavy. Not from dread, but from something unspoken between them. The cockpit lights had dimmed again, casting them both in warm shadows. Morgan's hands hovered, near the controls, but there was nothing more to pilot. They were safe for now, tucked inside a pocket of dead space beneath the magnetic veil of Sarvan EX's outer storm. Ceridian sat beside him, her breathing calm, eyes fixed on the dark beyond, the viewport not watching for danger, just being. Her fingers, pale blue with a soft iridescence, rested loosely on her lap. For the first time, they weren't clenched. "I've never seen anyone fly like that," she said softly without turning. Morgan let out a slow breath. "I've had a lot of practice, running." A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. "You run like someone who still believes there's something worth reaching." He didn't answer right away. Outside, lightning flickered deep in the atmosphere, casting the interior of the cockpit in brief flashes of silver. "We survived," he said, almost to himself. Again, Ceridian shifted to face him. "That wasn't just survival, Morgan. You protected me when you could have run, when you should have." His gaze drifted toward her slowly, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You saved me," he said. "That signal you sent. Those weren't just words. That was a warning carried in blood memory. They ran because something in them remembered what your people once meant." She looked down for a moment. It wasn't power. It was legacy. Pain inherited and repurposed. Morgan nodded, then turned to her fully. "You didn't have to use it." "Yes, I did." "You could have died." She looked at him, eyes steady. "So could you." Something in the quiet that followed shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to close the last distance between them that words could no longer fill. Morgan stood and extended a hand to her. "Come with me." Saren took it. They walked through the corridor without speaking, the floor beneath them humming with a pulse of stabilizers and redirected heat coils. The ship was old, yes, but it was theirs now. Shared space born from trust rather than necessity. He led her past the galley, through the main archive chamber to the small observation deck, a curved dome of reinforced transparent steel that opened toward the stars. The lights dimmed automatically behind them. Just the two of them now, backlit by constellations neither could name. She stepped forward and pressed her palm to the glass, feeling the faint coolness through her skin. "I used to dream of this," she said. "Stars without chains. Silence without dread." Morgan stood beside her, and now she turned to him, her voice a whisper. "Now I don't dream. I choose." There was no hesitation in how she reached for him. She touched his cheek first, curious and reverent, like rediscovering something sacred. He didn't move, didn't speak. His breath caught slightly when her fingers brushed the line of his jaw, then traveled slowly to rest at the back of his neck. Then she kissed him. It wasn't urgent. It didn't need to be. The intensity was in its control, in the way her lips shaped themselves to his like they belonged. There, Morgan responded with the same care, one hand moving to her waist, the other brushing through her long white hair as though memorizing the feel of her. When they parted, her forehead remained against his. Their breaths mingled in the narrow space between them. "I don't know how to love without pain," she said. "You don't have to," Morgan replied. "You just have to start with presence." She closed her eyes. "Then stay here with me." "I wasn't planning on going anywhere." He felt her exhale, a long, slow surrender of something she'd held inside for too many years. Sarah leaned back just enough to look into his eyes. "There's something I didn't tell you." "What is it?" "When we transmitted that pulse," someone responded. Morgan stiffened. "Union?" She shook her head. "No. Older. Hidden. One of my mother's people, via my aunt." His breath caught. "She's alive? She found us. Or maybe she was always watching, waiting for the right moment." Morgan took that in with a slow nod. "Does she want you to leave with her?" "I don't know yet," Ceridian said. "But I do know this: she kept a vault. A real one, not just memory, continuance. The last life seed of my people untouched, waiting for me. And what do you want to do?" She stepped closer again, laying her hand over his chest. "I want to plant something that isn't just survival." Morgan covered her hand with his. "Then we go together." Her voice trembled slightly, but not with fear, with something else. "If we claim a seed, if I bond with it, it chooses lineage. The future it encodes won't just carry my blood." His eyes searched hers. "I understand," he said. "Do you?" she asked gently. Morgan cupped her face in both hands. "Seren, I don't want a monument. I don't want a relic. I want a life with you. And if that life carries forward in any form, it'll be because we built it together. Not because of history, because of choice." She closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. "Then come with me. Claim a seed and claim me." He kissed her again. Longer this time, deeper, not just need, not even hope, but certainty. Later they lay together beneath the window of the ship, her skin warm against his, shimmered faintly in the starlight. His hand traced the shape of her spine slowly, as, though each vertebra was a new constellation to remember. They didn't speak much after that, they didn't need to. In that silence, trust became truth, and truth became a beginning. Together, they set course for the vault, not because they had to, but because love, real love, doesn't erase the past. It chooses a future. The landing was quiet, no fanfare, no waiting crowds, just the sound of landing struts locking into place and the faint hiss of atmosphere equalizing as Morgan powered down the ship. The world below them was small, unnamed, and hidden, tucked between the ragged folds of collapsed star maps and long-erased charts. It didn't appear on any Union registry, no patrols, no satellites. Just oxygen, gravity, and silence. That was what made it perfect. Morgan stood at the edge of the ramp as it extended, breathing in air that was clean and alive with the scent of wet leaves and ancient soil. A shallow valley stretched out below, the ridge. Mist drifted low across the ground, clinging to strange ferns and brittle-bark trees with silver veins that shimmered faintly under the morning light. Ceridian stepped beside him, wrapped in a shawl woven from fiber. Morgan couldn't. Identify, not scavenge, not synthetic, something grown, something hers. Her white hair moved gently in the breeze, and her amber eyes reflected the soft light like they were made of something older than the sky itself. "This place remembers," she said softly. Morgan looked at her. "You've been here before?" She shook, her head. "No, but something solar seeded it long ago. The resonance lives in the plants. The soil holds our frequency. You can feel that?" She turned to him and smiled, not the ghost of one, not a flicker. A real, full smile. "I am that." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. He followed her. They moved through the trees slowly. Suritian's fingers brushed each branch and leaf as they passed. Not harvesting, not disturbing, just acknowledging. And as they reached a rise in the valley, a thin column of glass emerged from the overgrown slope. Smooth, seamless, untouched by time or weather, buried until now. A vault. She knelt at its base, palms pressed flat against the soil. Then she began to hum. Not a melody, not a song. A frequency. Morgan felt it more than he heard it, like his bones remembered it before his ears could. The column pulsed once with pale light. Then again. The ground beneath him shifted with a soft sigh. The vault opened, not violently, not with defense measures or technological flair, with invitation. Inside, light filtered through crystalline panels that responded to her presence. Glyphs illuminated. In sequence, data patterns spun slowly, coalescing into language, then fading. This was a seed vault, but not of weapons or command codes, of culture. She walked ahead of him, reading everything. Glyphs that had no human translation, images that pulsed with memory. Her hands passed over rows of suspended biocapsules, plant genomes, textile memory weaves, fragments of recorded solar sensory history encoded not in text, but in temperature, sound, and pressure. Her people had never stored information the way others did. They felt it into being. And here it still was. Morgan stared in awe. This is... She turned. Home. He stepped closer. You knew this would be here? I hoped, she said. I followed the field imprint. You followed me, and the vault followed the name I remembered. Sarah reached to the center console and pressed her palm to the activation seal. It lit up in a slow pulse, syncing with her breath. A clear orb rose from the center, smooth and alive with inner motion. It glowed faintly with gold and pale blue threads of energy swirling within. What is it? Morgan asked. The last heirloom, she whispered. Solar life seed, a vessel of choice. He frowned. Choice? Our kind didn't reproduce by cycle. We chose, when the glyphs aligned, history, mind, bond, then we passed it on. Not obligation, consent. Every generation had to be willed into being. She turned, placing the orb into his hands. It was warm. You found me in ruin, she said. You gave me silence when I needed it, space when I feared it, language when I thought I'd lost mine. You didn't rebuild me. Morgan's voice was hushed. No. You reminded me I was whole. He held the orb, stunned by the weight of it. Not just what she meant, but what she was. Not a relic, not a rescue, a partner. I don't want to bury the past, she said. I want to plant it. They stood in the heart of a forgotten world, surrounded by the unspoken history of a people who had refused to vanish. Sarah stepped closer, placing her hands over his. I want to build something new with you. Not because you saved me, not because I owe you, but because you see me as I am. Morgan's throat tightened. He didn't speak. He kissed her. This time it wasn't cautious. It was full, grounded, and sure. Outside, the mist had begun to rise, curling in gentle waves through the valley as if the planet itself was exhaling. Later they would begin cataloging, building, learning what the solar had left behind and what they could carry forward. But not yet. For now they stood together in the middle of something not lost but returned. He looked at her. The woman, the galaxy had thrown away. She looked at him, the man who chose to see what no one else would. And in that moment, the last daughter of the solar was no longer alone. She was chosen and choosing. Together they stepped into the light of their own beginning. Not an echo of the past, but a new story rooted in memory, grown from trust, and alive with love. The soil was warm beneath their feet. They had walked the vault fields for hours, weaving through the whispering grasses and flowering glyph vines that curled up around their boots like threads remembering footsteps. Morgan carried the life seed in a reinforced pouch against his chest, one hand resting over it without thinking. as if the orb had already begun to sync with the rhythm of his heartbeat. Saridan walked beside him. Not behind, not ahead. Beside. Her hand brushed his now and then lightly, as though reminding them both that this was real, that they were still here.